Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya, who comes from a town where they are trying to put out fires about who their next monarch will be. Anyway, good morning.
Do you people see what you're doing? Every day I'm defending you people, just letting you know. Just be patient. Just be patient.
We're patiently, almost impatiently waiting because, and Dr. Bati, don't now make it a town thing. When things are blossoming.
No, I'm an
oh, really? When things are going well, there's this Ogunparapo. Now that there's not a matter of your town, there's your business.
Dr. Bati is the Egbama and I'm just the Ijebu lady. No problem. No problem.
I hope you're ready for the Awujale who comes through the courts.
Oh, God. We wouldn't want that. That wouldn't be conducive for the people. Let's just hope that the family get things together. I don't know why we're having it so difficultly, to be honest, because after the dearly departed Awujale died in July of 2025, we should have had a new king 3 months later. It's been a long, long time. So hopefully the Fusebo family will get their act back together because, it's not fair, is it? All righty, well, let me tell you what's happening around the world. Donald Trump, he came to Davos threatening to take Greenland by all means necessary. But within a few hours, those threats of military force in Greenland, tough tariffs on European countries, tensions with NATO nations, and a 90-minute speech at Davos, Trump seems to have taken a few steps back to rethink his position. How? Well, Trump had a very productive meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. It was after that Trump said that he had agreed the framework of a future deal on Greenland. Now, no details have been announced over what that deal will look like, but for now, the question continues to be, could this be wisdom finally prevailing, or another example of taco, as you mentioned, Trump always chickening out? We'll have to wait and see. Well, let's take a listen to some of Trump's very, very long speech.
People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. We want a piece of ice for world protection, and they won't give it. They have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statement. Iceland, that I can tell you. I mean, our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland. So Iceland's already cost us a lot of money.
Well, we definitely hope that Canada heard what Donald Trump had to say. Very, very interesting points in his speech. And as important as Greenland is to Trump, it was very interesting to hear that he referred to the territory as Iceland. He did so 4 times during that speech. We'll see what happens there. There was also, moving on now, there was so much in his speech that you may have been forgiven for forgetting about Ukraine, which appeared to have been pushed to the side. Now, that could be a reason why Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has changed his mind and he is flying to Davos after all. A meeting with Donald Trump he has today. It has been confirmed. Trump says that there are, essentially, he says that both of them, the United States, Ukraine, that they are reasonably close to a peace deal. Meanwhile, there is a US delegation meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Russia shortly. So we'll just have to wait and see if peace prevails. But on the other side of that, let's move over to Japan, where the man who admitted to killing former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been sentenced to life in prison. His name is Tetsuya Yamagami. He's 45 years old, and he did admit to shooting 67-year-old Abe during an election campaign appearance over in the city of Nara back in July of 2022. He fired several shots into the leader using a handmade gun. Now, he had always maintained his guilt, which makes the verdict itself pretty straightforward. I think everyone knew he would be convicted. But during testimony, Yamagami said that his actions were driven by anger towards the Unification Church. That's a South Korea-funded religious organization that critics in Japan have described as a cult. The shooter said that he targeted Abe after seeing a video message of the former Prime Minister sent to a group linked to that church. And he said that he wanted to damage the organization and draw attention to its political connections. Goodness gracious. And lastly, on today's edition of the World Brief, the military junta in Guinea-Bissau has announced presidential and legislative elections will be held on December 6, 2026. That would make it that election day would come almost a year after the previous government, led by Umaru Sissoco Umbalu, was overthrown in a coup. Now, political uncertainty and democratization prospects are now in focus ahead of ballot preparations. Now, in a presidential decree, General Hota Inta said that the necessary conditions for holding free, fair and transparent elections had been met. Guinea-Bissau remains one of the world's poorest countries. It has been dogged by coups and attempted coups since its independence from Portugal more than 50 years ago. But with that, we go on to our newspaper review. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. And This Day leads with the reports that Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugar, has urged foreign investors not to write off Nigeria based on isolated security incidents. He's arguing that Africa's geopolitical risk is often overhyped. Now, the New Telegraph this morning, it does report that troops of Operation Hadinkai uncovered the mass graves containing about 20 terrorists who had been killed during clearance operations in the Timbuktu Triangle over in Borno State. That exposes the scale of insurgent casualties, and it undermines terrorist propaganda that says that they haven't been affected, while separate operations in the northeast and the northwest led to the neutralization of even more terrorists and the rescue of 62 abducted victims. Let's take a look at the Punch. So this morning, the Punch does report that the federal government is moving to fast-track the trial of about 5,000 terrorism suspects in a pre-trial detention by reviewing case files in order to expedite prosecutions or dismiss weak charges altogether. That's as Nigeria records a sharp rise in terrorism conviction rates. Let's take a look at the Daily Independent. So we've got two stories on there. Firstly, Katsina State, the chapter of the ADC, the African Democratic Congress, has condemned the alleged plan by the state government to release 70 suspected bandits from prison, describing it as irresponsible, that it's a betrayal of victims of insecurity. And also staying with the Daily Independent, there's also quite an interesting story in terms of the EFCC just here. The EFCC, that's the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, has returned about 1.28 billion naira recovered from Sujimoto Luxury Construction Limited to the Enugu state government over the alleged diversion of funds meant for smart green school projects, with investigations still ongoing and possible prosecution if criminal liability is established. Now, the Enugu state government has completed nearly all of the schools that they had hired or contracted Sujimoto Luxuries to prepare. So it seems as though that story has met a full circle moment with those monies being handed back to the Enugu state government. Nevertheless, let's move on to The Guardian. And this is the story that jumps out. So essentially, US Congressman Riley Moore has said that the White House will soon prepare more options to protect Christians in Nigeria from persecution by Islamist extremists. This follows a fact-finding mission and testimony by Bishop Robert Barham. However, the presidency, through Senior Special Assistant Abba Hashim, has dismissed claims that Nigeria's insecurity is faith-based. He continues to stress that violence affects all religions and warns that framing it as a religious war could deepen divisions and undermine national cohesion. Well, let's move on to the Daily Telegraph of the United Kingdom. We're just taking the one British paper today, and it does focus on Donald Trump and, of course, Greenland. So the Telegraph is reporting that President Donald Trump has struck a deal for the big, beautiful piece of ice, as he referred to it, Greenland, that is, and dropped the threat of UK tariffs and tariffs affecting other European countries. I mean, some would say that this headline is a little bit misleading because he actually hasn't struck a deal yet. What he said is that they've agreed the frameworks of a deal, but then that opens up questions of legitimacy and whether or not Mark Rutte has the ability, the powers to do so. But those are your newspaper headlines. Annual Brief. Love to hear your thoughts.
All right, thank you so much. Let me begin with Guinea-Bissau, with the ceremonial junta, if I may call them that, because, of course, we know the background of this is that many allege that the president staged his own coup as he knew he'd lost an election. And I don't think we're waiting, or I don't think it's in order for the junta to be calling a new election. What is in order is that there was a person who won that election. The results were there. The results are available. They need to declare that person as the winner. They do not need to go back to election, especially especially with the reports of widespread suppression of journalism and journalists and general hampering and hindering of freedom within society. Now, I'll quickly go to Donald Trump. I mean, I sat through the entire 90 minutes. Well, I was in the gym, but I listened to the entire speech. And I think it was quite instructive to hear his reasoning for Greenland, which unfortunately a lot of the media has left out. And he was saying that he's not interested in any critical minerals in Greenland, that it's not feasible. But what he's interested is in its security relevance. And, you know, he gave the example. We all know that Greenland was a war theater for World War II. We know that during the Cold War, it was also used as a point of tension and a chokehold when tensions were high between the United States and Russia. So his own reasoning, I'm not sure I agree with it, but his reasoning is that in all of this, that the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, which I'd spoken about earlier, the GI-UK, is back in focus. Just as important as we see the Bab el-Mandeb Strait with Somaliland and Yemen in that area accessing the Red Sea, this GI-UK gap is just as important. And lastly, as I close, I think there was also a stark reminder of where the world went after the 1971 Nixon shock, which is when we delinked the US dollar to the gold standard. And that's when the world intrinsically became dependent on the US dollar. And that is what has facilitated for a leader like Donald Trump to be able to say, when America goes up, the world goes up. When America goes down, the world goes down. So we also need to question our role as a global society in being so ready to be dependent on the United States and the US dollar.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, like you mentioned, very long speech, had a number of things. He also used the opportunity as part of his anniversary, 1 year anniversary as President of the United States, to highlight some of the successes, at least in his own view, of his time in office. I think something else that, since a lot of analysis has been done around his desire for Greenland, negotiations or lack of, the responses by world leaders, including Mark Carney, and a few others whom he had mentioned, either when he was going off script yesterday. But beyond that was also the opportunity for people to see where he had started from when he became president, which is America, make America great again, America first. And almost moving away from just making America first to making the Western Hemisphere first. You would note in his speech some of the statements he made in a way trying to bring Europe to his side, including demonstrating or highlighting the fact that he himself has origins in Europe. He said 100% Scottish, 100% German, and that, you know, he couldn't recognize, some parts anymore because of their weak migration or immigration policies. So it was almost moving away from now, and that's why I jokingly refer to him not just as President of America, but almost positioning himself as President of the Western Hemisphere, President of the world. And so that's something to look at. Has his policy changed from Make America Great Again or America First to West Hemisphere First? Because that then has far-reaching consequences. Then he talks about the accusation of him as being racist in some instances or white supremacy in certain instances. Right. So yes, Greenland was a big part of the speech, but there were also fringe elements around that spoke a lot about where he might be moving to in his second term. Is it just about America or just pushing? And, you know, he made reference to Somaliland. Some people had questions around this. In the context in which he brought it forward. Sorry, Somalia. In the context in which he brought it from, almost, bordering on racist, but even more importantly, beyond America, is now this thing around, let us stick together as one, the white supremacy and the like. That, for me, was one of the things that stood out from his speech yesterday.
Okay, quick takeaways from President Donald Trump's over 1 hour speech. It was an over 1 hour speech, laced with threats, subtle appeals, and then, of course, America First rhetoric. Now, the Danish foreign minister says the day ended on a better note than expected, which I was trying to allude to earlier, was a confirmation of the spirit of dialogue, which seemed to have worked. After all, President Trump met with the NATO Secretary General. He also said that the tariffs that he had scheduled for February 1 and June 1, 10% in the first instance, 25%. Yes. He's not going to go ahead with it. And then he removed the threat of military action. And then talked about this framework deal. All of that is consistent with the theme of the spirit of dialogue. However, the details in terms of the framework deal, we don't know. They have not worked that out. So there will be negotiations. Second is the fact that, you know, they are talking about rare earth minerals in the Arctic region. That looks like what the United States is interested in. How can the U.S. be given access? And then Trump is talking about the Golden Dome protection for that region to prevent easy access to the United States in terms of possible attacks from Russia or China. So the devil is in the details, but I think the more important thing is that the markets responded. The markets did well in the U.S. They were cautious, you know, investor sentiment, you know, market flat in Europe. But what comes next is what is more important. As for Guinea-Bissau, it was President Goodluck Jonathan who led the Elders Forum mission to Guinea-Bissau, who said that it was a ceremonial coup, because that coup was announced by Sissoko Embalo himself before he left for Ivory Coast. He was even granting interviews, announcing his own deposition, you know, removal. So what happens December 6th? The clarity about that coup being ceremonial will become clear, whether it was Embalo that was behind it. Finally, as for Japan, it's very important. Now, Japan has one of the strictest gun control issues in the world. When this gentleman, what's his name is again? Yamagami. 45-year-old Yamagami. Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving Japanese ruler since World War II, on July 8 in 2022. Now, it was a shock. First, about gun control. The other issue that was raised was the connection between the Liberal Democratic Party and the Unification Church that was founded by Moon in 1954. So these are the emotional issues that came up, but more importantly is that the prosecutors have had their way. They wanted life sentence, but there are also issues about family, about parental neglect. Yamagami said his mother took all the family insurance and gave to the Unification Church. He had to leave university because of it. And that's a message for all these hallelujah mothers in Nigeria. You don't go and sabotage your family because of faith, because of religion. And so that's what drew the boy into crisis. And so this is part of the conversation. And I'm saying that there are lessons here beyond politics that mothers in Nigeria can learn. Don't take family insurance, family heritage, and go and give to church. And then you will wrong foot you, the family, and then your son will think, oh, if I kill the president, I will send the message. Anyway.
So.
Well, I hope I made that point clear enough.